Hey everybody, Douglas Blair Roberts here, the Super Vader 400, and of course the brown skinned human here, back for another video. And this time, this is a sequel to my Doug's worst comic books list, except this is a sequel and opposite of that. This is Doug's favorite comic book movie list. These are all of the comic book movies I like and enjoy and consider some of the best and some of my all-time favorite. And once again, just like with the last one, I do not care about box office. I do not care about box office popularity, box office or popularity. It's about spirit of the comic books, how they fare as movies, quality over quantity, and and how enjoyable and how much entertaining they are. That's what this list is based on. There are a lot of popular choices that everyone would choose for best comic book lists. There are also some controversial choices on here for films that people would not choose in a best comic books list. But this right here, this is Doug's favorite and best comic books list. So with that being said, let's get started right now. This is my world. Oh yeah, before I continue, one more thing. At the time I recorded this video, one of my favorite movies, Shazam 2019, I had not seen yet, so it wasn't included, but that is definitely one of my all-time favorite comic book based movies. It will definitely be in a future list when I redo this video with video footage. But with that being said, let's get started right now. Alright, people, it's time for part two of Doug's favorite and best comic book based films. And with that being said, the very first one on this list is the 2018 film Aquaman. This film is number one because I consider it one of the best superhero films of all time. Who knew Aquaman would be the one to save the DCEU and put them back on the right track. Aquaman and Shazam. Shazam got the best critical reception, but Aquaman grossed the most money, grossed over $1 billion, became one of the highest grossing films of 2018, and I didn't see it to 2019. This is already one of my best films of 2019. Story, action, cinematography, cast, everything. One of the best films of all time. Who knew Aquaman would be the one to save the DCEU? And I think this blows the Marvel Cinematic Universe out of water, quality wise. When it comes to quantity, spectacle, popularity, multiple other things, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has this beat. But yeah, Aquaman 2018, one of the best films of all time. Number two was the Avengers trilogy. Avengers 1 through 4, with Avengers 1 and 2, that's 2012, and Age of Ultron being the best Avenger movies of all time. Both of these films were awesome and entertaining, and both of these were spot on with the comic books. You had the 2012, which was the film that changed the game, the very first superhero team up movie, and the biggest box office spectacle of 2012, and inspired other studios to create their own cinematic universes. Then you had the sequel, Age of Ultron, which was bigger, badder than the first one, with a much much better and intimidating villain, and the best villain, in my opinion, in the MCU, in Ultron. So yeah, two of the best superhero movies of all time, and two of the best in the Avengers series. Now for its follow-ups, that's Infinity War and Endgame. These two films right here. Let's start off with Infinity War. Infinity War and Endgame, while in my opinion, quality-wise, they're not as good as the first two Avengers film. When it comes to box office spectacle, these two films are the biggest and baddest films there are. These two films were bigger than other box office spectacles, such as Star Wars, the Star Trek franchise, the Transformers franchise, GI Joe, um, the DCEU, and the previous two Avengers films, and of course the Pacific Rim films and the Godzilla films. All those films I just named are usually the biggest box office spectacles to ever hit theaters. This film, Infinity War, and its pre-sequel, Endgame, were better than both of them. However, these films, they were inferior. When it came to screenplay wise, they were inferior to the first two Avengers movies, which is why they're number two on this list. I was hugely disappointed with the writing. I do not like the Russo brothers. I love the cast, the action, and the production team, and Kevin Feige, who are these are the four reasons these films are good. But I do not like the directors and producers of these movies, and those directors and producers are Kevin Feige. Are the Russo brothers, and who's the other guy? Oh yeah, James Gunn from the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise. Number three, number three on this list is is Captain America: Civil War. My opinion, one of the best probably the best, one of the best comic book movies of all time, because this film tackled real and social issues and featured a civil war between the group, and that climactic battle between Iron Man, Captain America, and Bucky, when Iron Man discovered the actual fate of his father, discovered Bucky, under influence from Hydra, had killed Howard Stark, with Captain America defeating Tony Stark's Iron Man armor, and before that, the iconic airport fight scene where Captain America and Iron Man's team fought each other, and featured the debut of Spider-Man in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So, Captain America: Civil War, what an awesome film. And this was the biggest box office spectacle of 2016, which wasn't considered that good of a year for films. I love 2016, but it wasn't considered that great of a year of movies. Number four is Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. What an awesome film this was right here, man. let's talk about this film. I remember after seeing Deadpool and Star Wars The Force Awakens, I initially decided to skip this film because I did not want to be disappointed again, especially when I read the negative reception. When I finally got around to seeing this film, from the opening scene with Batman and Superman, I mean with Superman and Zod, with a recap of Superman and Zod fighting each other with Bruce Wayne watching, to the Batman origin scene, all the way to the final battles between Batman and Superman, and the climactic trinity of Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman fighting Doomsday. Doomsday. This film was awesome, and the Ultimate Edition version is even better than the theatrical cut. It explains some of the inconsistencies and plot holes that existed with the films, and I consider one of the best DCEU films, one of the best DCEU films of all time. Number 5 is another 2016 film, Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange is on this list because this superhero film was vastly different from the other comic book films. Whereas the other comic book films were science fiction fantasy, this was purely fantasy with mysticism, chi, and magic. This is also darker and much more creepier than the other Marvel films because this film talked about amputation, rehabilitation, and paralysis. Touched on subjects like amputation and paralysis and dimensions and stuff. So yeah, this was one of the best and most unique films I've seen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's why it's on this list. It was spot on with the comics too. The only problem I had was some whitewashing. The ancient one, she's a female in this universe. In the comic book, he is an Asian. In this film, she is a white person. She's a white she's a white person being characterized as an Asian in this film. So yeah. Number 6, Squad. Suicide Squad. This was one of the despite the negative reception, this is one of the highest grossing films of 2016, and this film right here was one of my favorites of 2016. Just like with BVS, didn't think this was gonna be good. I didn't think a super villain team up movie would be good, but boy was I wrong. And I didn't see how the death of Superman and Dark Knight Returns leads into Suicide Squad, but I love how it led into Suicide Squad. Also love this film for being a total campy Comic book film. This was for the most part spot on with the comics being based on the modern iterations of Suicide Squad, the 80s and 2000s versions with elements from the original 50s, which was a team led by Rick Flag, and even my favorite characters were everyone did a good job with Will Smith surprising the hell out of me as Deadshot, and the main villains of the film. I love the Enchantress and our CGI brother, and I like how, like I said, I like how comic book it was. A lot of people hated the Enchantress because of how cheesy she was, but that's how it is in the comic books. I like how they. One thing I like about DCEU over Marvel is how they take something from the comic books and completely translate it to screen, no matter how cheesy or over the top it is, instead of altering it for real life like Marvel does. Marvel does. The only problem I would have with this film is that the villains from this film, instead of getting Deadshot, Harley Quinn, Killer Croc, and Captain Boomerang to deal with, and Rick Flag to deal with that threat, you should have called the Justice League Dark team led by Constantine with Deadman, Spectre, and the Swamp Thing. You should have called that team to deal with the Enchantress, but they didn't want to confuse. They didn't want to confuse they didn't want to confuse people with two Justice Leagues, so they put that on hold. But yeah, number seven is Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman. Don't have much to say about this other than that this was not only the first film not only the first major superhero film based on a female in a long time, the first successful one. But this is the DCEU film to receive positive reception from both fans and critics. And when this film came out, things to be looking up for DC. That was until the end of that year. So yeah, Wonder Woman 2017, one of the greatest films ever, one of the biggest box office grossing films of 2017. 8 is, oh, you should have known this was going to be on this list. Dragon Ball Evolution. It's number 8 because they didn't pass the test, but I thought this right here was one of the best comic book films I've ever seen. It is still one of the greatest martial art comic book films I've ever seen. My only problems with this film is that they didn't make it the source material accessible to newer viewers. They changed the source material. That doesn't bother me, but it bothered a lot of other people. It bothered and angered a lot of other people, and that's not a good business decision. If you're gonna change the source material, then make it accessible to newer viewers, which you didn't do. You made it accessible to people who already know what Dragon Ball was, and several behind the scenes business decision I didn't agree with is why this film is number 8. But I consider it one of the greatest superhero martial arts comic book anime films of all time, despite the negative reviews and low box office numbers. But yeah, so yeah, Dragon Ball Evolution. Number 9, the Power Rangers movies. First off, you have the iconic box office spectacle of 1995, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie, which I thought was so much better. I love the use of realistic muscle tan armor suits with the White Ranger having the best costume. I love the Beast Wars PlayStation era style special effects, and I love the rockin' soundtrack, the legendary soundtrack from this film featuring music from legendary bands and musicians such as Shampoo, who performed the iconic Trouble song, but which plays at the final scene during the trailer and the credits. And I loved Phil Hartman's, I think is Good Time, which plays in the opening, and of course the Eddie Van Halen song Dreams. They also had their own rendition of Kung Fu Fighting and that remix of the Power Rangers television series theme for the film. So yeah, then you add Turbo, which Turbo wasn't as good, but I thought story wise Turbo was vastly superior to the first Power Rangers film. The problem with Turbo was since this was a lead into a television series, they had a television style budget. They had cheap 70s, 80s style costumes. But one of the things like about this film, besides the in-depth storyline and action, was the soundtrack. Unlike the first film, which had licensed music, this had its own this had its own brand of music produced by Saban with its own musician and Ron Wasserman and his band and several other people, and really it was really cool. These two films had two of the best soundtracks of all time. Turbo did not pass the test, unlike 1995. That's why they're number 9 on the series, despite how awesome they are. Number 10, we go in the anime movie route with Dragon Ball Z Broly, the legendary Super Saiyan. I saw Broly, the legendary Super Saiyan, for the first time in 2003. It was awesome back then, and it's still awesome now. One of the few pieces of Dragon Ball I actually still like and enjoy today. The sequels were the second coming was okay, and Bio Brawly was terrible, but I still enjoy it. Now for the final one, Super Brawly, which was awesome. I thought the first Brawly movie was vastly superior, but Super Brawly got a better Brawly film, and this Brawly is now canon. And Super Brawly is one of my best and worst films of 2019. It's in both of these lists. It's Doug's best and worst superhero list for various reasons. So yeah, that was Super Brawly. 11 is, in my opinion, probably the greatest live action anime of all time, and that was the 2018 film Bleach. It's number 11 because of poor business decisions and low box office numbers. But this right here is one of the greatest live action films of all time. This was spot on with the anime. It felt like I was watching a live action replica of the anime. The only problems I had with this film were the female cast members weren't that good. The guy portraying Chad was Asian instead of being Mexican. They could have went to Spain or the Philippines, or actually went to Mexico and got a Hispanic looking person to play Chad. Third problem I had with this film was the business decisions. The box office with a budget of 3 million only made about 4 billion yen, which is about 4 million plus dollars here in America, I think. And its future is in doubt right now. And next was they released this film. They released this film in theaters in Japan, but only in select theaters here and on Netflix. They should have had a full worldwide release here in worldwide theater everywhere here in America. There wasn't that much playing in late 2018, and this Bleach is more popular here in America than it is in Japan. And I hope they take a look at those numbers, that most of the support comes from here, and does a sequel. But I highly doubt there'll be a sequel to this movie. But you never know. But that's why it's number 11, despite how awesome it is, and despite being one of the best films of all time. I was more excited for this film in 2018 than I was Infinity War. I was looking forward to this film the most. I've been excited for Bleach live action since it was announced in 2012. Next is number 12, the X-Men series. X-Men series, they started it all. The original series, that's the original trilogy, 1 through 3, Wolverine Origins, Days of Future Past, and of course Apocalypse with Wolverine Origins and the original first 3 X-Men films being the best. Um, Days of Future Past was the reboot this franchise needed, but the middle part was so damn boring, and Apocalypse was just terrible. But I still liked it for various reasons, which is why it's because of the how terrible First Class was, how terrible First Class, Days of Future Past, and Apocalypse were, is why X-Men is number 12. But back in the early 2000s, they were some of the best films ever. They were some of the most iconic, legendary films ever, and part of the reason it was because of films like X-Men and Spider-Man that we have the very awesome MCU of today. 13 is the Thor Trilogy. Thor Trilogy, one of the best superhero trilogies of all time, between one of the best Avengers in my best Avengers and superheroes of all time, Thor. I like Thor no matter what version he's in. I like um Shakespearean Asgard Thor, which is the Thor in the first movie. I like Avengers Thor, which post Avengers Thor, which is Dark World Thor, and action hero Thor, which is the Thor in Ragnarok, which I love the shaved head and edge they gave to Thor, making him more cooler with younger viewers, because the Shakespearean Thors from the previous 2 movies just wasn't doing it for people. I like Thor no matter what, and this was an awesome trilogy. This was an awesome trilogy with the first 2 budget wise being the best, and the third story wise and how it led up into Infinity War being the best. All 3 were great, man. 14 is Iron Man 2008, the very first MCU film and the start of something great, man. 15 is Ant-Man 1 and 2, with 2 Ant-Man and the Wasp being one of the greatest comic book movies of all time. I enjoyed this more than Infinity War. And I like how Ant-Man 2 was taking place right around the time Infinity War, right around the same time Infinity War was happening, because I was mad when the ending happened, when Hope, Hank and Hank and Pym disintegrated. I was so angry with that ending. But yeah. 16 is Green Lantern 2011. One of my all-time favorite superhero films. It's 16 because box office wise, box office and critical reception wise, it didn't sit well with critics, and it didn't make much money at the box office. But in 2011, I thought this was one of the greatest films of 2011. I expected this film to suck, but I was a Green Lantern film and saw it. I came out, this exceeded my expectations, and I saw this in 3D. This was one of the best comic book movie experiences I've ever had at a theater, because I watched it in 3D. 17 is Batman Forever. 89 and Returns. Batman Forever, in my opinion, the most definite live action portrayal of Batman is Val Kilmer's Batman from Batman Forever. 89 Returns '89 is the very first really dark superhero comic book film, and Returns had the best Catwoman, best Penguin, and even the originally created character of Max Schreck, the three best villains ever. They overshadow Batman in this film. 18 is Watchmen, one of the coolest and most revolutionary, one of Zack Snyder's best films, in my opinion. And Watchmen showed you could make an Avengers film, you can make a superhero team up movie, and it was awesome. Ozymandias, the villain, in my opinion, is one of the coolest DC characters of all time, man. Judge Dredd, and one of the most complex films too, and spot on with the comic books. Now let's move on to the next one. 19 is Judge Dredd, 95 and 2011. These films are 19 because neither film neither film made any noise when they were at the box office. You had the 1995 film, which was hated because of differences with the source, because of liberties taken with the source material, and it didn't make a lot of money at the box office. But I thought Judge Dredd '95 was one of the coolest and best science fiction comic book films of all time, and one of Sylvester Stallone's best movie roles. If you look at the comic book version of Judge Dredd, Stallone, he looks like Judge Dredd, which is why he was chosen. He has the look and body. Carl Urban has the look but lack the body, the muscle mass of Judge Dredd. And the '95 film was much more entertaining because that was the whole saga of Rico. The saga of Rico, which I thought was one of the best storylines in the Judge Dredd series. Then you had the 2011 version, which was spot on with the comic books and spot on with the origin of Judge Dredd. Was a cool Batman Begins style reboot, but when it came out, nobody cared about the 2012 Judge Dredd movie. Nobody cared about it, so the film flopped despite the positive reception. 20 is the CGI Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series. That's 2014. That's the best, in my opinion, TMNT Out of the Shadows, the best Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film of all time, and one of the best in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise. And TMNT 2007, which had one of the coolest video games, ever, and was a pretty awesome movie and reboot in its own right. So yeah, that's Ninja Turtles. 21, they're 20 because, with the exception of 2014, none of these films while these films were set well with critics, had mixed reception with critics. All of these films had a mixed and negative reception, and none of these films did much at the box office. That's why they're 20, despite how awesome they are. 21 is Guyver the Dark Hero, one of the best live action anime films. Reason it's 21 is because it didn't make that much of an impact when it came here to America, and this film was straight to video. Its prequel, which wasn't as good as this, got a theatrical release, but this didn't. But Guyver the Dark Hero, one of the best live action comic book films of all time, and one of the best live action anime films of all time. 22 22 is 22 is Spawn, 1997, and the HBO series Spawn, the very first major superhero film starring a black and brown character, in the HBO series, which was even better, having more stuff from the comic books. Like one of my favorite villains, Kill, is 22 because the 1997, neither of these made much of an impact when they were here. However, the HBO television series is still popular, but that's why it's 22. 23 is the Spider-Man series, with Homecoming and 3 being the best, followed by 2 and 1. Tom Holland is the best Spider-Man of all time, and Homecoming is probably the best Spider-Man film. Spider-Man 3, because of the content, in my opinion, is the best Spider-Man film. You have Venom, Sandman, and Harry Osborn as the new Goblin, and the black suit, and all that stuff in one film. 2 was widely considered the best Spider-Man film of all time, one of the coolest superhero films of all time, and not the best. And then you had 1, which was the start of something great. I love the origin of Spider-Man, how it was told in the Sam Raimi trilogy. 24. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 and 2. Not the best superhero movies ever, but some of the most entertaining superhero movies of all time. And in my opinion, the Guardians of the Galaxy started it all with me for to introduce me to the very awesome Guardians of the Galaxy comic books, which are way better than the films. They're 24 because of bastardization of the source material. I do not like James Gunn, but I love the actors, and I love the action sets and production of this film. 25 is the Naruto movie franchise. The Naruto movie franchise is 25 because despite how awesome these movies were, they're huge in Japan, but they didn't make much impact. They're huge in Japan in the anime community here in America, but they didn't make much impact here when they came here to America. First, you have the last of the original generation of Naruto. Then you have Boruto, the movie, which is the first movie of the new generation of Naruto. It also features the the characters from the previous eras of Naruto. Then you have Naruto movies 1, 2, and 3. You have 1, the ninjas clash in the snow, where Naruto fights the snow ninja. 2, where Naruto fights some English style knights in contrast to the various shinobi Naruto has fought in other films and in the television series and comics. And 3, Naruto, Sakura, and Rock Lee in their summer outfits, where Rock Lee is straight up beast mode. These movies also feature some of the best fighting in Naruto. And last but not least, you have the Shippuden movies. You have Shippuden, the first movie. Don't remember much from it, but I saw it for the first time in 2015 and 16, and thought it was one of the coolest films of all time. Then Bonds, which I've been wanting to watch forever, and finally got a chance to watch it in 2017, where Naruto and Sasuke fight a Dragon Ball Z Brawly style supervillain in Dr. Shino, something I'd always wanted to see as a kid. Before I understood the power level differences, I always wanted to see Naruto and the great group fight Cell, Brawly, Omega Shenron, and Baby. Before I understand Super Boo and Kid Boo, before I understood the power level differences between those characters. 26 is Astro Boy 2009, one of the coolest anime films, CGI anime films of all time, but despite positive reception from critics and fans, this film was a box office failure. Failed to outgross its budget. Dragon Ball Evolution was much more successful than this movie, but still one of the coolest comic book movies of all time. Now it's time for the honorable mentions. First is Speed Racer 2008, one of the best live action films, but it was a box office failure. Fist of the North Star 1986 and 95. Wanted to include these movies in this list, but I thought they deserved to be somewhere else. But some of the best, the anime 1986 is one of the best in the anime community live action film. I thought that was a great live action B movie, but neither one of these made much of impact. Number 2, the next one is Mortal Kombat 1 and 2, which is Annihilation. I thought Annihilation was much better than 1 adaptation wise, but I thought Mortal Kombat 1, when it came to film wise, was much better. This film has comic book elements, but this film, along with the next three are better suited for best video games. Next is the 1994 live-action Jean-Claude Van Damme Street Fighter film. This got a lot of negative bashing from critics, but Raul Julia, one of the best Bisons ever, was praised. His performance was praised, and this film was actually a pretty good alternate world of Street Fighter. That's why I watched this as. Then you had Street Fighter Alpha and Street Fighter 2, the anime film, which were much closer to the source material. You had Alpha, which adapted the Street Fighter's Alpha 1 and 2 of the Street Fighter Alpha storyline, one of the best storylines and games in the Street Fighter series. Then you had Street Fighter 2, the anime film, a alternate retelling of the Street Fighter 2, Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo video game series, and some of the best in the anime community. Next is the Transformers movies, with Transformers Dark of the Moon, Age of Extinction, and Last Night being the best, followed by the 1986 followed by the 1986 movie. Then of course Justice League 2017, one of the coolest DCEU films ever, but also one of the most blandest and forgettable of the DCU. And I wanted to include this in the favorite movies list, but I forgot all about it, and that was the entire DC animated movie library. First, you got Justice League versus Teen Titans, Green Lantern, Emerald Knights in First Flight, Batman and Robin Sub-Zero, Mask of the Phantasm, Batman versus Dracula, Justice League Dark, the anime movie, Return of the Joker, Hellboy, Sword and Storms, and Blood and Iron, Doctor Strange 2007, The Invincible Iron Man animated movie, Hulk versus Wolverine, and Deadpool and Thor, and of course, yeah. Now for the top four, 27 is the Punisher Trilogy 2004, 89, and Warzone. They're right here because none of the Punisher movies have set well with critics or did make much money at the box office, but they're one of the coolest trilogies of all time, with Warzone being the most accurate to the comic books, 2004 probably being the best, and 89 being the coolest Punisher of all time with Dolph Lundgren as the Punisher. 28, Daredevil. Daredevil, one of the coolest, in my opinion, most underrated comic book movies of all time. It's 28 because this got mixed to negative reception with critics. Didn't do much in theaters. However, the unrated cut received rave reviews, and a lot of people didn't like Affleck as Daredevil. I thought he did a great job. 29, the Blade trilogy, one of the comic book films that started it all. In comparison to the stuff of today, is not as great, but this film started it all, with 3 and 2 being the best, and I love 1 because it featured young Wesley Snipes. So yeah. Then 30, Hellboy 2004, and its sequel, Golden Army. Some of the best comic book movies ever, but it's overshadowed by everything else on this list. So right now, this was Doug's best comic book based films. Best films. These are all the comic book films I watch and enjoy. Well, I'm done for now. It's time for me to hit my music. I'll see you guys later. Turn the video off now if you don't want to hear the rest of the music, man.